clients saying, show me your data sets. Just like, there's some enormous contractors in the US. I'd just be like, you've got an entire division dedicated to oil and gas. Literally, I want to see the data set for the last 200 projects you delivered. I just want the raw, and I'm going to evaluate that. And like that level of transparency and Hi everyone, welcome to the Beyond Deadlines podcast, where we tackle challenges that planning and schedule leaders come across on a day-to-day basis. My name is Greg Lawton, and I'm the CEO of an AI schedule management company called Nodes and Links.
My name is Micah. I'm a planning and scheduling manager for Intel.
Each podcast is designed to give you strategies and tactics that you can implement right away. And today, we're going to have a bit of a random episode because Micah and I were having a discussion before this of just a bunch of stuff we're interested in. So we're going to kick off with a couple of topics and see how it lands. Okay? Micah, first topic, please.
Let's dive into contracts, winning business, bids. I don't think we really cover all that much on the show. Just anything interesting on your side of the fence that you're saying that people would be interested to learn about.
Well, I'm seeing a. First of all, I'll say the different kinds of winning business in the industry. So you've fundamentally, in my eyes, you've got two kinds of people: the people who respond to bids and the people who don't bid. So most often, the claim management companies don't bid. You go to them because your back's against the wall. So, if you put out a tender, can you please bid to provide claim? They're not going to respond. And also the companies that provide a product. So there's some contractors that do the build all the way into operation and then sell the final asset. They don't bid. But I can't think of another example in between. Everyone else bids, and all of the bids are generally, show me you have capabilities in sustainability. We have capabilities in sustainability. It's a repetition of the answer. But the thing that I think is really, really interesting that is possible right now, and I tried it with a couple of my friends just messing around in the company. Right now, it costs about 1 to 5% of the value of a project to bid it properly. So to sit there and do all of 1
to 5%.
Yeah. If you're in defense, it can be like 5 to 7%. If you're doing full, you're mocking up a fighter jet and this kind of stuff.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking
complex projects.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking you were talking about putting together the piece of paper, the fake schedule and cost piece of it, and putting everyone's fancy faces on a presentation. Like, how does that cost 5 to 7%?
No, that I'd be like, this is like big project, but if you're bidding a consultancy job, if you're doing a 100 million consultancy job, I'd expect you to spend 250 $500,000 on that just in people's time minimum, maybe $1 million, that kind of thing. But the thing that I'm seeing here that's really interesting, generative AI breaking that model. Right now, companies are constrained because it costs money to bid and people to bid. So they can't bid on infinite things. So they have to pick the things they bid on. And every senior manager I've seen that walks into some kind of senior job, one of their first things is, we're going to become even more focused on what we bid on. Cool. How about the opposite, where I train an AI model on every single bid that we've ever won and lost, show it every single project that we've made money on and don't, and just have it write the initial bids for every single project that every client puts out across every continent this year.
So I would go in and refine your model a little bit, because I think there is a difference. If you start including some of the data sets you mentioned, there's a difference between winning the bid and then knowing how much money you'll make on the bid.
Mm-hmm.
To me, bids are still a little bit more, the fluffy, jazzy stuff where You do it's a sales pitch essentially, and you have some numbers to back it up. You just want to make sure your numbers are giving you a big enough margin that you're going to be successful. But I would also want that jazzy sales pitch, and then I probably wouldn't be revealing my numbers all that much. I don't know.
Potentially, I just think it's a super interesting time because the limits of capacity and the limits of cost that once existed in professional labor are starting to fall away. So, we've talked on other episodes about, productization and automation in scheduling. We're generalizing it to project management and bidding here. Yeah, I'd be looking at this. There's actually a venture capitalist I know recently actually put something like 10 million into a company that automates bidding for, I forget which industry. It's not projects, but it's something else, and they're making a lot of money writing. But like companies are just like, there's 20 grand where it'd cost them 200, and they're just writing the entire bid, submitting, and then if it gets to the advanced stage, then they're calling them up and going, okay, you probably need to come in and have a look at this and put some financial models together. But the company doesn't even have to get engaged until it's later on.
If anyone listening takes this idea and creates it, Greg and I will happily take 1% for giving you the idea.
If anyone takes this and creates it, I'd happily introduce them to the venture capitalists who give them 20 million for it.
I have a couple. I know a couple, but I will take the 1% and help you along. Well, let's flip this around then. If hypothetically we snap our fingers and everyone starts doing these Gen AI bids, there's a lot of trash that still these models pump out. And then they're still, at the end of the day, while it's refined trash, in my opinion, the bids are still what we talked about earlier. They're not, I think bids are actually one of the core reasons why so many projects are late, because they're bad forecasts to begin with. The owner's bringing a date that's probably not achievable, and then someone's going in and backward passing it and saying, yeah, we can do this, and we can do it for 10% less than the other person in the room. How, as owners, do you see essentially tipping the scales on that and making these things? Because the worst thing that could probably happen is an owner just creates like an AI bid reviewer, and we don't actually go anywhere. We just eliminate the people and keep the trash. How do we get that giant thing in the ocean that just picks up all the trash and cleans it out for us and maybe brings in a new process?
The big thing for me is, if I was an owner now, and you're completely right, like you end up in a prisoner's dilemma there, where if one person uses AI and you don't, you're screwed. But if you use it, and then you just get to some kind of middle ground where AI is reviewing AI and all of this.
It's just this like weird post-apocalyptic. What are we doing?
And then we come full circle to people writing bids and us reviewing bids.
Nothing's changed.
I think what could be really interesting there is just clients saying, show me your data sets. Just like there's some enormous contractors in the US. I'd just be like, you've got an entire division dedicated to oil and gas. Literally, I want to see the data set for the last 200 projects you delivered. I just want the raw, and I'm going to evaluate that. And like that level of transparency and honesty, and it's the equivalent of going to a surgeon and going, I want to see your stats. How many people have you killed?
What I mean is staying in industry. It's similar to asking for their financial health. You ask for their credit score and have they defaulted on any projects, and that's super interesting. Where you would just say, I want to see the schedules and the cost data, and then evaluate those. And then essentially, you could not even know anything about the project, but like we've talked a lot about before, where you started and then where you finished tells me enough of what I'm probably going to get over 200 projects.
Do you know what I find really interesting? So, my co-founder Christos, he's a professor in complexity science. He's basically modeling projects, and he's done a lot of work with in the insurance industry. He's written a lot of papers for the insurance industry and models. And what I found shocking was that project insurance, it's not based on any kind of project performance. The insurance companies don't actually care about project performance. It's based off balance sheet. So there's something called a surety. At least in Europe, I don't know in America. You could tell me about America, but basically they'll just come in and they'll say, "Can your balance sheet take the hit if we come in and just take all of this money out of your bank account because you fail and etc." And that's the check they do. They don't look at how likely that is. They don't, care about generally any incentives. And I'm talking here about the contractual insurance. There's things below that like safety insurance, etc., and whatever. But big contracts. I just find it. Imagine that. Well, this is the equivalent of like driving your car, and they're just like, "We'll provide you insurance, but you just have to show us you got $100,000 in your bank account." I don't really care if you're a good driver or not, or you've claimed or not. Like you've killed a couple of. I don't really care. Just make sure you have money there, so if you crash, we can take it.
I'm not really sure with you in the murder analogies today. Are you doing okay, Greg? Do we need to talk about anything?
I'm a bit tired today.
Do you need to go hit the gym or something? I think that's the second one in the last couple minutes.
Let's see if I can get a third out.
Yeah. No, I think that's super interesting, and I think we're going to see a lot of changes coming in the future. To me, I'm wondering, just thinking of not so much on the owner side, but on the GC side, you're going to have a lot of smaller, medium, and bigger players, and then on the subcontractor side as well too. And I just know from the past, the bigger players, it's harder to move. They're more bureaucratic. Things take longer to transition. So to me, I'm wondering how this is going to play out and who's really going to adopt these technologies fastest and find value out of them too. So it should be interesting. All right, let's switch gears up a little bit. We had an interesting conversation with Drag the other day. Our in-house, not in-house, but our good buddy, who's one of the top recruiters in the industry. He brought up some interesting topics, and one of them was he was talking about the different roles of project managers, and how if you are a doctor, going into a niche and finding a specialty actually gets you paid more money. And so my thought process is, we talked a little bit about project controls, but what are all these different project management roles out there, technical, non-technical, that people could potentially be investigating?
I think that's a super interesting thing, and one of the people that Micah and I follow and really like. One of the saying is the riches are in the niches, which if I'll say it again, but in proper English, the riches are in the niches. There is, by the way, I'll just caveat that on like overall, in general, as you go more niche, the supply is less, therefore the opportunity for supply to demand to be offset is much higher, but there's also volatility. So, if you're the most niche doctor in the world, you might be able to charge $1 million, but you might only get a patient every 10 years kind of thing. But on this, I was actually talking with...
Surprised you didn't mention killing someone. Good for you.
I'm trying to lighten my mood. I was talking with a friend of mine the other day, and he's a venture capitalist out in Silicon Valley, and he's actually just retired a fund. I think his fund was like $1 billion or $2 billion or something like that. And now what he's done is launched an initiative to pull low TRL, which is technology readiness level projects, through the valley of death into being operationally ready. I think it's a couple of $100 million or $500 million, something like that, the project. And I was talking to him about this, and long story short, he wrote a job description that was kind of, you must be able to do project management and general project management. And I was like, wait a minute. In my experience, there's a very big difference between a project manager who specializes in managing and minimizing technical risk, which are things like people who work at Kinetic, like people that work in fusion tech. So my brother works in fusion tech right now. There's no fusion reactor that's running and operational and generating electricity for money in the world, to my knowledge. So it's unproven technology. So you're just trying to get through milestones. The second one is commercial risk, where you're just outsourcing and managing a massive supply chain. That's very much government organizations. And the third one is operational risk, where your company is actually doing the doing and you're liaising with people and trying to, understand scheduling and profiling and shift patterns and all of that.
I would
and
say
I'd say that those three are very different
yeah.
beasts.
Yeah, and the third one is the one I have the most familiarity about, and even that tree has a zillion branches in it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can be a project manager of commissioning. You can be a project manager of this electrical system. You can be a project manager of HVAC. I mean, the specialty even within that third branch is endless, and so to me, super interesting. Tell me a little bit more about the first two, though, because that's the one I'm a little less experienced in.
Well, the first one, so I come from defense, and, the first one is very, very common in defense. It's like, imagine some professor at some university goes, oh, if I plug these infinity stones into this gauntlet, I can snap and, create butterflies around the universe. And you're like,
Oh
sounds
man,
good.
you could have took that a different way, but I love.
I could have done, but I didn't. I pivoted. But you're looking there and you're going, all right, well, I don't know if this is true or not. I don't know if this tech will work or not. But we need to prove it out through the milestones. So we need to develop some kind of proof of concept. But if the proof of concept is like a good 20 million, you're going to want someone project managing that. So it'd be like, right, how am I going to corral the engineering of the build of the first concept within the scope and budget of this to get to a milestone where I can produce a report saying, or the engineers can produce a report, this is doable. Yeah. And then it might go on to a next stage. Or if you've done enough of those, it might go into scale. So if they're like, normally there's kind of 3 stages. It's this technology works. Then they'll actually do a proof of concept of, and it can be manufactured repeatedly, because you can't just go from a proof of concept to suddenly let's produce 50 of them. You'd be like, what molds do we need to make, and where do we get them made, and all of this kind of stuff. And then, once you've made 50, you might be like, okay, well, let's make 5,000, and that's a different thing.
Interesting.
So that's really that
fusion.
First pick.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Oh, the second pick. And then I want to talk about fusion reactors because you got me interested.
What do you want to know about fusion reactors?
Well, let's go. What's the second? You said a risk commercial.
No, the second big one is like government organization, which is really subcontracting. So where where you're running a very light PMO model, where you're essentially defining output and outcome criteria and just contracting massive organizations to do it. You might have elements of government furnished equipment, so GFE, or contractor furnished equipment that you're passing and you have to manage, and you might have interfaces between contractors. But in reality, like the big risk that you're dealing with is contract risk.
Gotcha. No. So fusion reactors came up in my mind because I've gone a little bit of a tangent here. An Uber driver gave me a ride home last night from my wife and I went out to 90s dance club, which was a big stretch for us because we have 3 kids and we don't actually take many Ubers anymore. So both of us were very confused about how to do this and we hadn't done it in years. But anyways, this fine gentleman told me these wonderful stories about how he only drives at night. And, just why do you only drive at night? I'm thinking he had previously done maybe like a night shift or something and it falls in his schedule, but he's had a couple stories where he's really helped people out in need at night, not just the, drunk guy falling out of the car, but actually help people out. And what he said is like, if he can keep doing this and helping people out, it really brings joy to his life. I
Hmm.
thought that was super interesting. And the reason why I brought up fusion reactors is because on many times the project you work on and what you're doing and what that project enables, it really creates extra passion for your role and keeps you engaged, especially when times get tough on projects. So my question is, what projects interest you in the future? These can be real, hypothetical, that you would find
Ooh,
inspiring that you see coming up.
that's a really, really good question. For me, I like the equivalent of modern day cathedrals. So back in the 12th century, 15th century, etc., people would regularly engage in projects where it would extend beyond their lifetime, and their children and their grandchildren would see the fruit of it. Things like fusion reactors are that kind of tech to me. So I
Yeah,
think like working on a project which is a moonshot that would revolutionize the lives of the entire of humanity. Um, like the modern ones where you will see the finish of them, things like Neom in Saudi. I just love the concept of that because it's rethink all cities have since the dawn of humanity to have been built up organically. There's
yeah,
very few cities in the world where they've gone, this will be the city and it will never change.
yeah,
But that's one where they're like, no, we're literally building what is it, a kilometer vertical and 20 kilometers long or something.
yeah.
It's just a rethink of what an entire city is.
Yeah, I think it was like I remember hearing the history of any city, but you go back and these were not planned. And so some of these
No.
cities like San Francisco don't have enough water or are in earthquake zones or there's all these different things that basically because it was a nice port and a good trade zone and some people moved there and gold hit, boom, you have a major city. But it's not saying that that's the ideal place for one. Cities are super interesting to me and some of those bigger. There's a couple smaller ones that are popping up. You mentioned moonshots. I mean, there's loads of projects. Do those interest you? The moons, like we're gonna go develop the moon or put Matt Damon on
Oh,
Mars.
I absolutely love that. Do you know? You're like, I would love to be involved in those, but the problem is I'm not Chinese or American, or actually Indian at the moment. Like those are kind of those are the big space powers that are coming up, and
Yeah,
there's a lot of constraints on nationalities working on those things. So like you can't work at SpaceX unless you're American. That's the
really.
thing, and I'm like, I totally understand it because one person's rocket is another person's missile,
Yeah, yeah. Good point.
but you know those are the one. Like I think anything where we're pushing the bounds of what humanity has achieved and what it can achieve, I think those are the really super interesting ones to me.
Yeah,
There are other ones that I know a lot of my friends get really passionate about. So like current infrastructure that just makes people's days and lives better. So like I've got a bunch of friends working on a children's hospital over in Ireland. I'm like,
yeah,
that's actually a really cool one. Really cool. It's just, you know, my passion is more out there, more big. What about yours?
yeah. I think all uh the ones we've named have been super interesting. I'm a huge fan, boy, obviously, of large infrastructure. It's why I work at Intel. And being able to influence on a global scale everyone's lives. I mean, what we created Intel is going to go into everyone's computers
Mm-hmm.
and data centers. I mean, it's crazy to think about. That's like billions of people that you just impacted their lives. And so I think the advanced manufacturing space, and we're going to go on a
Actually,
wild
tell
ride in
us
the
more
next
about that
couple of
because a
years.
bunch of our listeners won't actually know what you're doing at Intel. They'll just go, Intel's
Yeah,
cool. That's a cool company. What is Intel actually doing with chips?
yeah, we're making loads of them. Yes. And so to build chips, you need these large, complex facilities to then create them. And what we need out there today is just more of them to keep up with the global demand. And so it's a massive construction undertaking. I mean, if you just check the news, there's the several facilities that have kicked off around the globe. And I mean, it's just exciting. So
Well,
it's
I
owner's
saw.
role, soup to like all the way through, beginning to end. You get to do. There's just so many different aspects and roles you can work on.
I I read. I think it was part of the US Gov website. I read that like the US, as in the government's commitment to chip building. I think they'd put something like 100 billion behind it or something. And
Yeah, there was
like, if you think about it,
there was
that's
the
a
Chips Act.
crazy number.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing that's helping to drive this is just moving international supply into domestic producers. That way, you have less risk, and
Mm-hmm.
countries not only like America, but other countries are taking that up as well. I saw an article the other day that India it plans to get into it. I mean, they have a lot of pharmaceutical companies in there, and they want to use that knowledge of building pharmaceutical facilities to get into that advanced manufacturing. So I mean, we'll see a big growth in that industry. I believe over the next couple of years, if the news is correct. And I just fortunate that I work at a place that is doing it.
Totally. Actually, you've just said something. I just put two and two together in my head. So, um, here's a little fact that no one will probably know. Um, most countries make their own bullets.
Uh-oh, here we go
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Greg
Well,
staying on
when I
theme for
say
this
that,
episode.
it's regarded as a sovereign capability for most countries, because if you can't make your own bullets, how are you going to defend yourself if someone invades? And it's generally a commoditized item. Like
Yeah,
it's a bunch of metal and a bunch of powder, and you put them together. Um, you could have massive economies of scale by outsourcing it to one country, but then you see the problem. And actually, this is happening with chip manufacturing now, because the
yep.
entire world runs on computers and the internet. Different countries are wanting chip manufacturing happening inside their country. So America, Britain, etc. The same thing with artificial intelligence hosting, so the big data
Yeah.
centers. And the same thing with internet hosting. So actually, I went to Cornwall, which is on the south coast of England, and you can actually see the underwater internet cables come inshore into the big. These things, enormous
Those
things.
are really cool. Those are really cool
Yeah,
projects.
crazy. Like countries basically want internet nodes in their country because then they control the internet in their country. So you could probably guess which countries have nodes
Yeah.
by
Well, I got to
which
work on a
countries are
couple of them at
controlling the
Google.
internet.
I got to work on a couple of them at Google, and I was just a moron. I didn't realize that there's actually cables running underneath the ocean from one point to the other that provide the
Yeah.
internet. And one day I was like, wow, didn't know that existed.
Where do they go on shore in America? In the UK, it's
Uh,
Cornwall.
there are loads
In
of
America,
places, but you have there's a big one that drops in at New York. There's a couple spatterings on the West Coast. I want to say LA, but you can go look up a map. Maybe I'll try and find one in the show notes. There's literally maps of these things that show where they all go. And
it's a little off project.
it's way more than you'd ever thought.
It's a little off project, but it's more manufacturing. But imagine being given the task. Hey, and by the way, these cables are like a good 2 or 3 meters in diameter. Imagine being given the task. Hey, so we want to lay a cable. Okay, cool. Where from? From London to New York. I'm like, all right, well that's like 3,000 miles or something. Be like, yeah, under the ocean. Okay, and we want to do it over, the ridge that's pulling apart. So there's volcanoes and stuff. I'm like,
Ugh.
cool. Please build me that cable. Like, I'd be like, what? How
Yeah,
much? How much rubber? I don't know if they're made of rubber. I have no idea.
I know. I forget, but they're definitely strong. Yeah. And then I would be like, well, I saw this video of a guy who kayaked it once. Does that help?
Going full circle. I could write the bid. We will provide you a cable that's made of unobtainium.
ChatGPT, how do I write a bid for an undersea cable?
I
All
think
right.
like we're in the best place now in the world of projects to do exciting stuff. Like I've had a couple of friends that have actually just moved to Saudi because I think they have the most $1 billion projects per like capita of person or something like that.
Yeah.
Like America's got the most big projects, but there's 300 million people in America. But I think like you've got
Yeah.
Neom, Red Sea, Oxagon, Sindala. You've got a whole host. I think now's like the time you can kind of pick the cool projects that you want to work on. And if you're in America, I'd go to space. I'd be 100% doing space projects or chip fabs.
I like my feet on the ground.
Well, live a little.
Yeah.
You went dancing last night. Push it out even more.
Yeah. Wow. My feet are sore now because I'm old. Anybody got any recommendations that aren't Skechers for shoes for people with old feet? Let me know. Put it in the comments. All right, Greg, we should wrap this one up.
We should. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Tell us if you like this kind of format and what you'd like us to discuss in the world of projects. Of course, if you're loving it, Micah and I do this on a Sunday for the fun of it. It helps if you share it with a friend or a colleague you think might find it interesting. And yeah, thank you for watching. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time.